What's up, guys? Welcome to Ep.4 of the MindTalks podcast. So today's guest is one of the best minds in combat sports strength and conditioning. He was nominated World MMA Awards Trainer of the Year back-to-back in 2018 and 2019. He has degrees in sports medicine and exercise science, former strength and conditioning coach at American Top Team, and now owns a Daru Strong Performance Center, and the list goes on. But you don't want to hear it from me, so let's introduce Phil Daru.
What's up, man?
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I got you. You hear
All
me?
right. Yeah, perfect. How you doing?
I'm all right, man. Dealing with the ACL injury. I just got, and so that's about it. Really just trying to go through the motions right now and take care of that. But I'm good though.
For sure. So I wanted to sort of start it out with you giving a little introduction about how you sort of started with all of strength and conditioning and training, and because you were a former football player and then turned fighter. And I want people to have a general background and not coming from you and not me. So.
Okay. Yeah, I started lifting weights to get ready for high school football at the age of 13. So I guess I've been lifting weights for 15, 16 years now, somewhere around there. But primarily my focus and my goals growing up were to get bigger, stronger, faster, get better condition. And I had to learn how to do that properly. So started to read some books, get more in-depth research and look into things like that so I could be ready for my sporting events. Fast forward a little bit, went to college, played for the University or Alabama State University. And then after my college career was over, I had to do something. I wanted to compete. I wanted to, still be an athlete. So I took to MMA first, but my first love was boxing. So I was a huge boxing fanatic. So, Floyd Mayweather, Mike Tyson, obviously, you got Muhammad Ali. And so I looked up to those guys, and I also did some Kempo karate when I was a kid. And so I was looking for a boxing gym, and it just so happened that as I was looking for a boxing gym, there was an MMA gym called American Top Team that was around my area.
Mm-hmm.
And Ian Thomas was the coach there. It was more of an affiliate ATT. It wasn't the big gym that everybody knows where I used to coach. It was actually an affiliate in a small town called Port St. Lucie. And so I went there just to find out what I could do to train. And I ended up, going full go into MMA just simply because that gym was there for me. So instead of doing boxing, I was more, thrusted into MMA in general. So I started doing MMA, and as I was doing MMA, I had my degree in exercise science. So I was training clients and I was training some of my teammates, at the same time to make a little bit of money on the side as I was trying to build my career. Fast forward a little bit, I would say 2 years later, and I opened up my own facility where I would do boot camps and run strength and conditioning with my teammates that I was working with or working out with. Then from there, it kind of built up. I built up my reputation. I built up my credibility in that area. And as I was doing that, obviously I was still a professional fighter. So I was trying to juggle all of these things at once. And say fast forward about 4 years later, and I opened up from an 800 square foot facility when I opened up at the age of 22. And then a couple of years later, now we're in a 11,000 square feet facility where I had pretty much everything under the sun in that warehouse space that I had. We had a cage in there, we had a ring in there, we had strength equipment, we had boot camps going on. So it was a big community and a huge gym for me to sustain. Now, at the same time, I had just retired from the sport of MMA due to concussions and mainly from the sport of football, just getting accumulation of head trauma throughout the years. I think I was about 7 or 8 years old when I first got my first concussion. So, you fast forward there and, through the years, things started to take away. And it was interesting because I was like 2 weeks out from my last fight. And I actually won my last fight, but we wanted to get a quick turnaround because the fight that I just had prior was really good. I took no damage, won the fight, and so I took a turnaround fight, and basically within the next 3 weeks was looking to fight another opponent. But in that same time frame, about a week and a half from the fight, I got kicked in the back of my head by a teammate, and it was by accident. Obviously, we were actually technical sparring. We weren't even really going full go, and kicked me in the back of the head, and I was a little wobbly. I knew I was concussed, and it was a little bit different at this point where I felt that I wasn't recovering as well as I usually do. So I went to the neurologist, and he basically said if I don't stop, I'm going to have Alzheimer's by the time I'm 50, and I'll have all these problems going further. And I was having short-term memory loss and things of that nature. So I was convinced to a degree. It took me a solid 2.5 weeks to really basically call it quits and retire from the sport. And I had to ask my coach at the time, Dean Thomas, what does he think I should do? And he said, if it was your knee or your back or something like that, we could work around it. But it's your brain. You can't really do that.
Yeah.
So, and at the time, my son was just being born, and my gym was thriving. So my gym business, my coaching was going really well. So I had that thriving business going. So I had a place to fall back on. Whereas I know a lot of fighters don't have that. So what happened then is, I ended up retiring and went full go on coaching. And at the same time, there was an opening for a strength and conditioning spot at the gym, American Top Team.
Mhm.
Um, at the main gym, I should say, down in Coconut Creek. And so I asked Dean. At this time, he was a coach there too now, at full time. And I asked him if he had anybody that he would want me to work with since I'm not fighting anymore. I still want to be in the sport. I still love the sport. And he said, I might be in luck. Just bring your resume down. So I brought my resume down. And the first day, not even the first week, but the first day, I went there and I coached Dustin Poirier, King Molawal, Hector Lombard, and Tisha Torres.
Yeah.
And so they kind of got thrusted into the fire. But the good thing was that, I'm used to these individuals. I used to go down there and spar, every once in a while. And I know those guys. And again, I was a fighter myself, so it wasn't a huge deal for me. And I knew that I knew what I was doing in that realm when it comes down to physical preparation. So it was just a matter of them taking to me from a personality standpoint. And I had to kind of gauge the way I would go about relaying over information to them and coaching them, and informing them. And it was a little bit different because I'm used to high school athletes, I'm used to college athletes, or even my teammates where I know I can push them a little bit more and they need to somewhat be motivated. These guys are pretty self-motivated. So I learned really quickly that I didn't need to be that rah-rah guy 100% of the time. Now, every now and again, I'm going to have to do that. But for the most part, they're very self-motivated. So I don't have to do as much to that degree anymore. More so, it's more about pulling them back a little bit. So you fast forward a little bit there. 5 years later, now I'm opening up my own facility. I have my gym that's about, I want to say, 15 minutes from Coconut Creek, which is Boca Raton, Florida, and I'm partnered with Mo Vaughn, who's an ex-baseball player. Mo was actually one of my clients after he retired, and so he opened up his own spot for baseball, and we just combined forces, and now we have a sports performance gym, and we also have baseball-specific training. So again, I'm still working with my fighters. That's my prime focus, my combat sport athletes. I have Olympic judo athletes. I have professional boxers. I have world champion boxers. And then I have my elite level fighters, my MMA guys. So, and then not only am I working with the ATT guys, I'm also working with some of the Sanford MMA guys too as well. So it's
Yeah.
good that I get to spread, my knowledge and work with large people, not just in ATT, but around the area at least.
Yeah, you can definitely branch out in that area to different people, and a lot of people can definitely benefit from things you have to say, things your knowledge. And one thing I kind of want to touch up on is what you said about having something to sort of fall back on,
Yeah.
because what intrigued me to talk to you is because we sort of had the same background. As I played baseball since I was like 3 years old, got to a pretty high level, started traveling a lot for college showcases, talking to people, stuff like that. And then eventually the passion burned out. It wasn't there anymore. And then that's when I got introduced to jujitsu from my dad. And now I'm about 11 months into training, and I want to pursue fighting professionally. But I also am not stupid and know that it can end as an injury can end it all, or it's not a steady, like, I know that the time's gonna come when you're gonna have to stop, so you have to sort of set things up for after that. And I'm I'm very interested in sort of the why behind training and the physical stuff and the things that you're into, which is it's awesome to talk to you about it and get your perspective on it too.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes down to I hate to say this because I do believe that you should focus in on your true goals and your aspirations and your dreams and your vision. But you could also have something that you know that you're good at, that's outside of the realm of what you're focusing on, and that could be your passion project in a way. That could be something that has something totally different, some totally outside of what you're trying to focus on, because it gives you a good yin and yang in perspective, right? It gets you away from you having to focus full go on a certain aspect, and that keeps you focused on that particular goal. Um, and it keeps things flowing a lot better, keeps things less monotonous. And so, with that being said, is you got to find something that you feel that is going to help you get into that parasympathetic state, that less stress state,
Mhm.
and with that, that'll give you a backdrop of understanding of, okay, once I'm done fighting, this is something that I can pursue because I'm really good at it, I'm passionate about it, and it's totally different from what I was doing 10 plus years beforehand. Now, again, I know that you're going to have to focus, and that was one thing that I would say that people don't do enough of, is focusing in on that one particular aspect of what you're trying to accomplish. Um, that was one thing that messed me up in a way, was when I was coaching. I was still a professional fighter, but I had a full-time business. So a lot of the fights that I should have won, the focus wasn't there, and I ended up losing those fights.
Yeah.
So what I would say for the young athlete that is still trying to pursue things, keep that in mind, but also make sure that you're focused in on the goal at hand. And the goal at hand is to win fights and to progress in the sport. So then do that. But at the same time, you need to have a fallback option that is going to not deter you away from your true focus point, but give you something else to do. Right, give your mind at ease, and trust me, that will help in your furthering your career in general.
Yeah, thank you. How do you so how would taking that how do you find that balance of having that focus and that determination for that one goal, but then having that sort of thing that that you can fall back on and that relaxes you and that brings you to that state. How do you think you find that balance? Is it different for each person? Is there a guideline? How do you look at that?
Yeah, there. I mean, it is different. A lot of people are 100% in, and there's nothing wrong with that. The only thing that I do see is burnout with those types of individuals. So, you need to organize your day. You need to organize your life in general, and I think that organizing and planning is going to give you balance no matter what. And that was one thing that I've come to realize and gotten better at. In the past, I hadn't had that ability to organize and plan appropriately. And I was full go, 100% all out, and work hard, grind every day with my head down. And that does help, but it does come with a cost. And a lot of things that are important to you get pushed to the wayside and may eventually fall off. So you got to make sure that you have an organized plan of action through each day, and set some time aside for yourself. Whether it be, whatever it is. It could be, you like to draw, or you like to listen to music, or you like to mix beats. I know a lot of my guys that I train with like to, do music, right? They'll do, what do they do? They'll produce music. So with that, they have time to do that, or they'll, do something that's totally opposite, or they'll go for nature walks and things of that nature. Now, that's not obviously it has anything to do with fighting, but it has everything to do with progressing as an individual. So just know that. And again, you should take at least an hour out of your day every day and one day out the week to totally just relax and decompress on the things that you're doing on a daily basis. Because if you grind yourself into the ground, you'll never reach the pinnacle of your success.
So do you consider that like we could say that day of just decompressing as part of like a recovery process? Do you
Yeah.
have sort of a recovery like routine that you do that after training or even just life in general, you had a hard week, is there sort of a day that you
Yeah.
take to recover, and what does that day sort of look like?
Well, for the most part now, I have a family, so I'm a husband, I'm a father. So what I do is I write down on my refrigerator too. I have a calendar for my wife, and then also have a calendar for myself, and then a calendar for my assistants and all my coaches. So like I have plenty of calendars all over the place, right? Plenty of
Mhm.
schedules out to do. But on the calendar on the refrigerator on Sundays is family day. No matter what I have to do, it's family day. And the main thing there is just to make sure that I'm spending time as much as I possibly can with my family. I take 1 hour a day for myself to train myself. That's something that is very important for me because it handles the intensities of the day, right? It de-stresses me in that way. I feel like I'm getting better physically, and that helps me in my profession. So 1 hour a day throughout the week, and again, I take that Sunday to just truly just have fun with my family, do whatever we can, even if it's just kind of laying around the house. Now I'm doing a lot of that right now because I don't have access to 2 feet or two
Yeah.
legs at the moment, but and I'm kind of driving myself crazy with that. But in all honesty, but it is nice to let your body kind of heal, and that's a part of training. People don't understand that or realize that is that even when you're relaxing and recovering, that's a part of your training because that's going to naturally progress you and get you to a point where you're going to super compensate and get better over time.
Yeah.
If you keep yourself into the ground and you're not enjoying it, in time you're going to get sick of it. You're going to get burnt out. And I'm not saying don't go all out. This is a guy, when I'm on my schedule, I wake up 4:30 in the morning. I get a lot of my stuff done before my family even wakes up when I'm on my schedule. So it's not about not working hard. It's not about not grinding. It's about finding that time, that balance there to either find time for yourself and decompress and have some relaxation in order for you to keep moving forward. And that's the main goal.
Yeah, and it definitely, at least in my perspective, hinders performance too, because it's like if you go 110% 3 days in a row, on that fourth day, maybe you're only able to go 75% and you can't maximize that day of training. So I recovery is definitely an overlooked thing, and it's something I've focused on these past few months, and it skyrockets your performance. And I want to talk about your leg, actually, your knee. So you tore your ACL, correct?
Yes, and my
And
slightly tore my meniscus too. Yes, I found that out.
and then so how'd you do that, first of all?
Jiu-jitsu.
Jiu-jitsu, perfect. And then you sort of got on like a prehab sort of routine for it, right?
Yeah, yeah. I had to. Well, in the beginning, I actually tore it December 1st or 2nd. I guess the first month of December, or the first week of December, I should say.
Mhm.
And so, yeah. So at the time, I was like, all right, I'm gonna get. I had a couple of seminars I had to do, so I couldn't go out and just get surgery on it. And then I had a couple of fights coming up. I think Dustin was fighting at the time, Joanna was fighting at the time. So big fights were coming up. So I didn't want to be down for that time frame. And so with that, I postponed it. And then when I went to postpone it more, I ended up. This is the entire. This is the. A lot of things happened. One, the COVID situation happened. So that kind of stopped everything. Then I was also moving into my own gym. So I was transitioning into getting out of ATT and opening up my own spot. So there was those things happening. And then it kind of just snowballed from there. And I ran into a doctor that was actually a friend and a follower of mine, Dr. David Abassi. And David is actually a cage side doctor for the UFC. Big fan of the sport. He came by just out of the whim, see me on Instagram, and DM me and say, "Can I come by? My office is like down the street." And I was like, "Yeah, man, come by, whatever." So he came by, and then I asked him. I was like, I tore my ACL, and he had no idea. And he was like, "Oh, really?" And I was like, "Yeah, man, I actually need to get it fixed." So we ended up like I still probably wouldn't have got it fixed if he hadn't walked in the door because I'm just so busy with all the stuff that I'm doing, and again that's why I'm talking about organizing and planning, because if I didn't have this thing organized, I probably wouldn't have got this done for another 2 years, and then further damage would have occurred.
Yeah.
So with that, we ended up getting it done now, and I knew that throughout that entire time that I wasn't getting it done, I knew I needed to get stronger. I needed to get more stable, more mobility. but that's what I do on a daily basis. The great thing is the reason why I tore my ACL was to my own doing, right?
Mhm.
You guys don't know the story. I was drilled, or actually we were rolling live with one of my partners, and brown belt jiu-jitsu, really good guy, and obviously he didn't do it on purpose. Um, but I was standing up in his guard, and I went to pass, and he wrapped a De La Riva guard. So basically, he wrapped his leg around my leg, and you'll learn this too. Um, but he grabbed my ankle in like a modified deep De La Riva and
Mhm.
sat on my foot. So my foot's in external rotation. And when you're not in the gi, it's very easy to slip out of that, especially if you're sweaty. You know what I'm saying? You can peek and turn your hip and get out.
Yeah.
Not the case in the gi because you have friction. And I'm not so used to training in the gi. Obviously, I was a fighter. So I'm like, all right, yeah, I'll just turn out of this. So I didn't see that he had my gi pant leg. And I went to turn out and turned my knees so fast and my hips so fast, but my foot was stuck in that external rotation. And as I turned with my knee
Just
around, just heard
yanked.
the pop. Yeah, I heard the pop, felt it immediately. I knew that this was bad,
Yeah.
and I was like ACL, possibly, um, possibly lateral meniscus, something along the lines of that. And so, I was moving it around, trying to put weight on it, and it didn't swell up. It didn't bruise up or anything like that. So I was happy with that. I was like, okay, maybe we're all right. And then it started to bruise, or then it started to swell up, and then I started to get a little worried. And then I got an MRI, and I was actually coaching, and my wife called me. And she said, "Man, you need to get home. You completely tore your ACL." And I was like, "Damn." So, yeah. And with that being said, my entire training has to do with prevention, right? Or at
Mhm.
least reduction of injury. I think that because my hamstrings are so strong, because my quads are so strong, because my tendons are stiff, and my joints and ligaments have great range of motion, I didn't do as much damage as I could have. Where now, obviously, me jumping on it and doing things to show movements for my athletes caused a little bit of a tear in the meniscus because I have no ACL anymore. So that was the issue. But for the most part, I think that the reasoning why I didn't do as much damage and totally do like a trifecta was because of the fact that everything was strong around it. So that's all I continue to do. I started to continue to learn and move in proper ways and learn how to load appropriately and move my joints in the proper range of motion that can increase recovery or speed up recovery in a sense, and then again we reduce the risk of further injury going down the line.
So you focus a lot on prevention with your athletes. Do you think that that's sort of a big part of bridging like the gap between athlete and elite athlete? Is there what do you think that line is of being of being an athlete versus somebody who is starting to get to that elite athlete level performance wise? What's that line sort of? When can you do you know if even?
I mean, really, you should be focusing on that from the start of your preparation as an athlete. That's one thing that you need to have. You need to have a baseline of understanding of how to move. You need to have joint integrity. You need to have proper mobilization of each joint capsule, and all those things are going to enhance your ability to progress without the risk of injury occurring. Um, Properly loading over time, progressive overload in a sense, and then also making sure that those exercises that you do are conducive to the joint prerequisites that you have. So, with that being said, you have to have an assessment first and foremost. You need to first assess every body part that you're moving, and then assess the ability to absorb and redirect force. So yeah, that's first and foremost. When you get older, when the athletes become a little bit more damaged and beaten down, I got guys that are I got fighters from 22 years old all the way up to 40 years old.
Mhm.
And the 40-year-old guys need more strength and conditioning and joint recovery than the 22-year-old, but the 22-year-old also needs to learn how to move appropriately, right? So we need to give them a baseline of understanding. And then with the older athletes, we need to try to reinvent the wheel per se. And it's very hard to teach an old dog new tricks, like they like to say.
Hmm.
We can also give them, I think they're more receptive to understanding that they need this more than the 22-year-old. So with that being said, I still will run a mobility training and assessment based on what I'm seeing. I program accordingly. But the guys that are, have a large amount of training background, let's say, for instance, a guy like Greg Hardy, who played in the NFL at the highest level,
Hmm.
been an athlete all his life. I don't really necessarily need to focus on power and strength with him
Yeah.
to maintain that, but I also need to work on the things that are lacking, and that's primarily going to be mobility, functional range, rotations, and having the ability to control ranges, and in all joint capsules, conditioning. So we look at it from that perspective of what does the athlete need at this particular time, and that's going to be the focus point. But as they're competing, we still need to make sure we're maintaining those other aspects of the sport.
So that's sort of how you like come up with a custom plan for somebody is you look at what they need to work on now versus what they already have been a part of or been doing. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what we look at weaknesses just like any other skills coach would do. Right? If a guy's coming in with a boxing background but has no idea how to take care of himself on the ground and he's coming into MMA, well, the focus is going to be on that.
yeah.
It's we're still going to maintain our boxing. We're going to still maintain the ability to strike, but for the focus in general needs to be on building up those weak points and plugging in those gaps. And that's the same thing with physical preparation in all modalities of training.
So you learn all these things over the years, you gather all this knowledge. Is there some things that you wish you sort of knew a lot earlier or things you incorporated into your routine or life, anything earlier?
I mean, people ask me that a lot.
Hmm.
Um, I would say, integrating the understanding of movement quality, mobility, um, not killing myself every day, fatigue management, like we talked about. So those are some of the key concepts. I used to do circuit training all year round, and I used to do a large amount of glycolytic work. But I didn't know that I was getting a lot of that in my skills training. So it's like I was beating a dead horse in a sense, right? I was burning the candle at both ends, and that doesn't need to be done. The goal really is to make sure that you're getting, especially in physical preparation, is getting the things that you're not getting inside your skills training, and that comes from not just the skills perspective, not
Hmm.
the technical side, but also the physiological side, the biomechanical side, the biochemical side. And when you can understand that, you're going to have a better, well-rounded athlete that you can help put into a cage or a ring or whatever, and have them produce the most performance possible.
Yeah, and that's sort of like the age-old question you can call it is like how do you balance fight-specific training versus your performance like weightlifting, mobility, all that stuff. I feel like so that balance to you, is it something again where it's more of a specific to that person like okay, this person maybe they're better technically but are lacking strength in this area, so let's focus on working out this many days a week as opposed to this many days a week. How do you sort of balance that that difference between fight specific or sport specific and their performance physically?
Yeah, that everything that we do, especially in an individualized sport, is going to be specific to the individual, right? So we need to make sure, even if they're working in a big group, I always auto regulate depending upon the person, right? They may
Mhm.
be doing the same thing, but reps and sets may change, the exercise may change, the method may not change, or the method may change. It really just depends on the person, right? It depends on where they're at in their camp. It depends on where they're at in their career. How much time they've had in the gym. I'm talking about the weight room, and how much experience they have in the skills training, right? So if I get a guy that's highly skilled, that's been doing jujitsu all his life, that's a black belt, and has Muay Thai belts and done boxing forever, and all those things, but he's never stepped foot in the weight room. But we know we need that to take him to the next level, whether he's, trying to win a belt in the UFC or whatever, then that's something that we are going to put a focus on. And then I'm going to make sure that I'm communicating at least with them and the skills coaches, if I have the ability to do so, to correlate and coordinate a proper program that is going to be conducive for them. Now, you have the opposite where you got guys that are highly athletic, um, highly efficient in the weight room, very strong. There's a point of diminishing returns. A fighter only needs to be so strong,
Yeah.
and what I mean by that is that, okay, if you go too much on that one side of the spectrum, remember this is a mixed modality sport. It's a mixed bioenergetic demand sport, and we're just talking about MMA, but we can talk about combat sports in general.
Yeah.
There's only so much you need to have relative strength wise to be successful. And then from there, you need to start to develop all those other aspects of the game. If a guy really needs to get in there and work his skills training, he may only need 1 day a week of training just to maintain what he already has or she already has. So, yeah, I mean, I guess that I don't know if that answers your question,
No,
but I
yeah.
think
Yeah, for
it
sure.
got a little bit better.
So I was watching some of your I don't know if it was your most recent podcast, but the one with Brian McKenzie. And I really enjoy breath work and meditation and stuff like that. Do you
Mhm.
incorporate that into your own training in your own life?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to do as much as I can now. Brian actually is going to send me over a protocol because of my knee, but yeah, I do it a lot with the fighters. I do it a lot with my athletes. They'll do breath holds and they'll do um, certain tests that are going to measure out their CO2 tolerance, their body oxygen level testing, and
Mhm.
that kind of gives me an understanding of how well they can utilize oxygen. And we'll also do a protocol that I use pre-fight or pre-game that is going to get the body prepared, rev up the nervous system, and then also increase or what we hope to increase VO2 max for a slight duration of time, so that they can compete at the highest level with the maximum amount of ability they can.
So yeah, I saw you posting on your Instagram story, and I wanted to know a little bit more about it. You were doing like hypoxic interval training. Could
Yeah,
you sort of explain? I just love all things with breath and sort of trying to maximize that. And I
yeah.
saw that hypoxia interval training, and if you could explain some of that, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, hypoxic is without oxygen, basically. And what we're trying to do there is we're trying to increase EPO by breaking down or bringing down SpO2. And the goal really is to get that percentage down to roughly 80-85%. If we can get that down and sustain that percentage, we're going to drastically or at least increase erythropoietin, the red blood cell count, to the working tissue, which is going to help with oxygen utilization inside the working tissue. It's going to help with buffering of lactic acid. So, and then again, we're helping them cope with air hunger while
Mhm.
they're actually in high intensity state. From a mental standpoint, it's very important, especially for fighters, because there's going to be a lot of times inside the fight that they're going to feel like they can't breathe, and they still need to be technical and still be explosive and still, remain with a high amount of energy output. So I took this actual approach from Oxygen Advantage, Patrick McCune. It's a Buteyko method, if you want to break down the methods of the breath work.
Mhm.
But basically, there was a couple of studies done. I can't remember the names, but there was a couple of studies done with some track runners that they would run 200 meters, and they would actually run the first 100 meters with nasal breathing only, or nasal in,
Mhm.
mouth out, exhale out, and then the last 100 meters, they would blow all their air out and hold their breath for the last 100 meters. And what they found was that they were able to increase their VO2 max by a substantial amount for about 90 minutes post exercise. So, whether that be getting them ready for an event or whether that getting them ready for a training per se, whatever is going to help them get the most out of that particular aspect of what they're doing, that's what we want to do. When we do the hypoxic training, there's a couple of studies out that has proven to increase VO2 max, that has proven to increase EPO in that working muscle. So we like to utilize that, or I like to utilize that with a lot of the fighters, especially with ballistic or plyometric style type movements or high intensity style movements, whether it be, and I like it to be more cyclical than acyclical, because they don't have to think as much.
Mhm.
They can go as hard as they possibly can, whether that be an assault bike, a med ball slam, um, hammer slams will do, battle ropes will do, a prowler push will do, or a sled push. So anything that's going to give them, a little bit of resistance, it's going to produce maximal force, right? Or I should say, a higher rate of force, and also get their heart rate up as much as they can. Now, the main thing there is recovery process. So I want to see how well they can recover in between those bouts
And bring it
of,
back down.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. So they're getting about 20 to 30 seconds of active recovery, and then they'll get a minute break after each round. So that minute round, I want to see how well they can drop their heart rate. So we want to get their heart rate up to right around lactate threshold. We want to get their heart rate up where it's going to be similar or simulated to where their heart rate will be in a fight. And then from there, I'm trying to see how well they can drop their heart rate down so that they can get ready for the next round.
So yeah, essentially that's what you're trying to simulate is that end of the round, bring it back down, and then go back out there and be able to perform again like you did previously in that same round.
Not only from a physiological standpoint does that increase their ability to recover, but it also, from a psychological standpoint, gives them that confidence knowing that they can go all out in the first round, the second round, the third round, the fourth round,
Yeah.
and still have more in the tank for the fifth round because they'll get that minute break. Right. So it both works hand in hand. And when it comes to the fight game and any sport in general, and you know this too as well, being an athlete, a lot of it is psychological. So the mental aspect of the game needs to be heightened. Your confidence needs to be there, and that
Mhm.
comes from proper planning. That comes from your preparation. And so I always make sure I reiterate that the fact that they're able to recover like that is very important. I have a guy that's fighting in Bellator next week, and we just ran him through that hypoxic training on the intervals with the assault bike, and his heart rate drops from 175 to 120 within 1 minute. I told him, you got plenty of recoverability. Just know that you can go all out if you need to,
Mhm.
in the final, or in the round prior, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever, to either get the finish or get ahead on the scorecards. So, and that works out well. And the goal really, again, like I said, is you got the physiological aspects of it, right? Increasing the ability to take and utilize oxygen, um, buffering capacity, and then also the mental aspect, the psychological aspect of knowing that they can drop their heart rate and knowing that they can produce high amounts of power even when they don't have air.
So when you're sort of like assigning a custom plan for each individual person, do you sort of do like research for that specific person, or do you just kind of pull from your general knowledge and sort of fill it in where they need it? Or is it more like your research process sort of? Is it a lot of reading and then applying? Is it um do you listen to podcasts? Like where do you get your
Yeah.
knowledge from, and how do you focus on applying that to each individual fighter?
All right. So, well, first, I have over, I used to have over 50 fighters. Now I have over 20 fighters in the private sector now
Mhm.
that I'm not working. It's very hard for you to do an individualized program
Yeah.
each person. But what I will do is I will auto regulate and I would move things according to that person. The systems may stay the same, like I always say, but the modalities, the exercises, the tempos are subjective to the individual, right? I run a condensed conjugate model, right? So basically, like, I took the regular conjugate method and I condensed it into a 2 or 3 week microcycle per se. And what that's going to do is going to enhance the qualities brought up all at the same time, because that's basically what conjugate is. We'll do constant variation so we avoid accommodation. And then from there, I'm picking what I need to focus on depending on the person, whether it be in camp or out of camp. And then also there's sections inside of camp. Now there's stage 1, which is going to be about 8 to 5 weeks out, and then there's stage 2, which is 4 weeks to 1 week out. Now stage 2 is going to be primarily focusing in on more power and speed and explosiveness and rate of force, because we set up the baseline of that through dynamic effort and maximal effort or submaximal effort in stage 1 of the condensed conjugate. Out of camp, however, I'm working on general physical preparedness. I'm trying to increase their work capacity. I'm trying to increase their ability to um, have strength for a long duration, right? Increase oxidative responses to fast twitch fibers, right? Mitochondrial density, aerobic plyometrics, things of that nature. Setting up the joints and the tendons and soft tissues to withstand load. Now, when it comes to when I get a fighter, right? Whether they come to me 8 weeks out, 6 weeks out, I usually don't take fighters 4 weeks out because pretty much I can't really do much with them at that point. We just kind of just wait till after the fight. Um, but usually it's around either 8 weeks, 6 weeks, and then they're off camp. If I have a fighter that is 8 weeks out, I need to get the most amount of information possible very quickly. So I run them through a personality test. We do a PAR-Q, right? Obviously, we want to see where their injury history is. And then I have a full-on conversation with them for about an hour, maybe an hour and a half, because I want to see what type of individual they are. What type of personality do they have? The Braverman's test does that for me too as well. It's a written exam that we use to measure out neurotransmitter dominance. So it shows me if you're dopamine dominant, acetylcholine dominant, GABA dominant, and then if sometimes we'll have hybrids. For the most part, we have a large amount of acetylcholine and dopamine dominant athletes, and that's what an athlete usually is. Funny enough, can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Funny enough, a lot of the baseball guys that I used to run this through, they were primarily GABA dominant, and that was because with a GABA dominant individual, they usually like a team atmosphere. They like structure. They like a schedule. They're very tempo driven, so they don't like to have spurts of different things going on. They like to be just routine as much as possible, and that makes sense because baseball, there's a long season. You guys are primarily going to be playing a lot, so there's not like an ups and downs. It's kind of like an even flow. It's almost like a marathon.
Yeah.
That makes sense. With the fighters, however, they're very A-type. They're very driven. They like to be structured, but they also like variety, which makes a lot of sense, especially for MMA guys, because they wouldn't be doing MMA if they only like to do one modality of training.
So
So,
if you're
but
gonna take that baseball guy who his sort of biomechanics are different and enjoys that team structure and he switches over to MMA, are there things you do to sort of change that and get him thinking more sort of independent and structured?
you can't change the way a person thinks. You can't change the personality. That's not your place to do so. I do have a fighter, however, that is GABA dominant, and you can tell because he's very team orientated. He's a guy that's always going to corner all of his teammates, even if he has a fight coming up.
Mhm.
He's going to cut weight with all his teammates, even if he has a fight coming up. And you can tell them one thing or another, and tell them that you need to focus on you. You need to, but they're very selfless individuals. And with that being said, that's very hard for a fighter, especially in a non-team sport, I should say, individualized sport, to overcome that. What you can do is make sure that they are getting their work in as much as they possibly can, and organizing their schedule around what they're trying to do. So, for instance, my guy that is GABA dominant, right? Um, he's cornered his teammates for the last 3 weeks. So he's been out for the last 3 weeks. He has a fight next week, right? So
Yeah,
when a
it's,
guy leaves to go help corner, the focus is on the guy fighting.
yeah.
So the focus isn't on him.
Mhm.
What you do need to do as a coach, however, is you need to give him his structured program so that he can do that on his time and then help his teammate out when he needs to, because he's going to do that anyways. So
Mhm.
you just, or as a coach, to give him his structured program or give him something to do on his own or with his teammate that makes sense for both of them, so that he can get his work in. So, and then as far as aggressiveness and things of that nature, you can rah yell at a guy, tell him that this and that. It's not going to be receptive.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
If anything, they're going to block you out. So you have to make sure that you can find a way to see what drives them, see what is their why of what they're doing, and that comes from a conversation, right? And
Mhm.
that's deep. that's deep questions, right? That's not just like, oh, I want to do this because I like it, or I want to do this because I seen it on TV, or I want the
Yeah.
money. There's deeper rooted issues that why people go in a cage and fight or go in a ring and fight.
Hmm.
You got to get to that deeper level, right? It's not just because I want to, I want to be cool, or I want, some people actually fucking tell me that, they want, to be like, oh, I wanted to get the girls when I was in high school,
Yeah.
like, come on, man, for real. And then you go into it like, well, I bullied as a kid, or I was fat as a kid, or
Hmm.
something like that. And so you get to that deep rooted issue, and that's where you can drive something out of them to get them to give you that extra intensity that you're looking for, that extra energy that you want.
So you can tell sort of where their head's at just from that conversation. Like when you start hitting those deep rooted problems, you could tell sort of sort of where their head. I mean, I know you don't know what the other person's thinking, but you can sort of start figuring it out, like what direction they're sort of thinking and how they're going about what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to a degree, you're going to learn the
Mhm.
process. You're going to learn them over time too, as well. You're going to learn how they deal with adversity. You're going to learn with what the thing, how they like to learn in general, whether it be auditory, whether it be visual, whether it be actionatory, something like that.
Mhm.
Tactile cue or whatever. But you're also going to figure out what pushes their buttons. And it takes time. It's not just like a one conversation thing. You may get a little bit of thing. You may get a little bit of something out of that. But again, it takes a little bit of time. There's a guy that I'm working with now that's been through a lot. That's been through probably more than I've ever known a person to go through. And he's very high up. He's in the UFC, and he's one of these guys that I had to first find out his detailed story. Then I had to coach him for a little bit because I just didn't know how he copes with certain types of energy, how he copes with certain types of adversity in training, And then
Mhm.
I had to look at some of his fights, and then I had to look at his past, and then I had to put it all together. So it's truly it's a large amount of psychology that goes into it,
Yeah.
and that's just from strength and conditioning, physical
Yeah.
preparation. Skills coach, it would go even deeper
Mhm.
because they got to make sure that he's ready to go come fight night, and also in the cage or in the ring throughout the rounds or while he's fighting. So it really is, something that all coaches should really take into account and understand.
Yeah, it's you definitely I feel like you take it to a whole new level, a good level. It's of truly a lot of coaches I feel like they're they're there to teach them how to fight, and I feel like you're definitely there to sort of go more in depth and how to really change their not only performance but just everything. Like you could really tell that you care about the fighter, and I think that's awesome. Awesome to see for sure.
Yeah, it's not really about. I know you said change. But it's not really about changing them. It's more about progressing them
Uh-huh.
and giving them the ability to understand what's appropriate, for the time. And a lot of it, comes with either taking things out or putting things in. It just depends on the person. So I'm I don't like to, that's why I don't like to call myself a strength and conditioning coach because it goes way deeper in depth than just strength and conditioning.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's because I care. That has nothing to do with like, a lot of people, like a lot of the times, bro, I don't make my money training fighters. And if any coach out there thinks that they're gonna get rich off training fighters alone, you're sadly mistaken.
Mhm.
I train fighters now because I love to work with those individuals because they trust in me and I want to see them succeed because at the end of the day, this is what I was passionate about. This is what I wanted to do. And if I can't do it myself, I want to make sure that that person that puts their trust in me gets to that level that they want to be in. And if it takes me to sacrifice a little bit of time, a little bit of energy, then I'll do so.
Yeah, I think we hit a lot of topics that we wanted to hit. So I think we can start wrapping this up, let you continue on with your day. First though, I'm gonna introduce a new segment. It's gonna be a 3 round fight, random questions. So I'm just gonna ask you 3 completely non-relating random questions that you're gonna have to answer. First one. So what is Phil Daru's favorite ice cream flavor?
The late night dough from Ben and Jerry's. It's the only thing I eat.
What is your last meal on earth?
A bacon burger and um, sweet potato fries.
And the
Yeah.
final question, you're in an MMA fight. You have to what is your combo that you're gonna knock the guy out with? You know he's gonna get knocked out at the end of the combo. What's the combo you're gonna go with?
So there'll be a jab to the body, there'll be an overhand. So it's jab down, overhand, right hook.
All right. That's it.
All right.
Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. It's an honor to have you on. I appreciate you taking time out of your day. That's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate it.
Yeah. I'll talk to you later.
All right.
See ya. All right, guys. That was Phil Daru. I hope you guys learned something. I learned a shit ton. So yeah, I'm gonna go study this, apply things to my life, and I hope you guys do too. So that was episode 4. Thank you for listening. Peace out.